Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing really well. One of the questions that I get asked the most is, I want to learn to play jazz, and I hear all this talk about the importance of learning the jazz standards, but how do I know which ones to learn, and what do I need to know for each one? And how do I figure out which changes to use? Do I trust the real book? Which real book? There's so many different interpretations of these tunes out there, and you want to know that the one you're investing all of your valuable time into learning is going to pay off and be useful. So today I present to you the first in a new monthly series of must-know standards in which we'll learn to play the head and the accompanying chord changes to some of the great jazz tunes of old. Figuring out which changes to play and how to play them can be overwhelming, so I've taken care of all the heavy lifting for you, and I'm going to show you my preferred choices. We'll avoid any crazy reharmonizations or obscure key changes, and we'll play these tunes in their most well-known keys, the keys that you'll commonly find them played in at jam sessions. These tunes will be presented in no particular order, but they're all worth learning and more than worthy of your practice time. I guess thinking about it, we actually already have quite a few entries in this series if we go back to some of my older videos. Georgia on My Mind, G Baby Ain't I Good to You, The Girl from Ipanema, Misty, West Coast Blues, and some of the gypsy jazz and Django pieces that we've learned. So do go ahead and check out those videos if you haven't already. I'll chuck them all into a playlist. Okay guys, so do let me know down in the comments if you have any particular requests. I already have like 100 of these ready to go, but always looking to add more. So just to clarify, like I said, I'll probably do about one of these a month, so they won't be interfering with all the things you're used to seeing on this channel, like blues and country and Americana studies. That will continue as normal. And there's so much more stuff to come as well. It's all about keeping it fresh, keep traveling that world of music, and stay inspired. Okay, so let's get on with it. Episode 1 on Green Dolphin Street. This piece has all of the regular hallmarks of a great jazz standard, things that you'd come to expect, like 2-5-1s and diminished chords substituting as dominant chords, but it also has a few other things that are quite unique to it, like the shift from the 1 to the 1 minor, for example. Pretty cool, pretty unique. So let's dive into these changes and see if we can make sense of them. So first of all, I'll go through the more basic approach to playing through these changes, and then we'll look at what we can add to spice things up a little bit. So we're in the key of C major, and we'll be starting on the 1. We'll go for a C major 7, rooted on the low E string here. This chord's going to ring out for 2 bars. Now rhythmically, it's up to you whether you just hit it on beat 1 of bar 1 and let it ring for the remaining couple of bars, or try something more like this, for example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or add some more to it, perhaps something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Just have a bit of a play around and see what you like the sound of. So that second change is taking us from the C major 7 to the C minor 7. So that's that unique thing that I mentioned. It's not often that you have a 1 chord and then immediately turn it minor like that. Now typically for the next few chords you're going to hear this. D major 7, D flat major 7, C major 7. That would be by far the easiest way to play through these next changes. But what I like to do is something that a lot of people do. They keep the C note down in the bass throughout the whole progression there as what we call a pedal tone. And I think that's what was really intended by the original composer. If you listen to some of the old versions, that's the kind of thing you'll be hearing. So if we take that into account, we can come up with this sort of stuff. C major 7, C minor 7. Now this portion of the shape here that exists on strings D, G and B, move it down a semitone to make this D major triad. But of course if we're keeping the C in the bass, we now have like a D7 or a D dominant 7 in third inversion, because you've now got the flat 7 in the bass. Again, move that triad down a semitone to D flat and put the C back in the bass. Now you've got a really interesting chord. You've got like a D flat major 7 in third inversion. And then move that triad down another semitone and you're back to your C chord. So playing C major with the C in the bass. Sounds really good in context. Check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. While we're on the subject of looking at these changes a little more closely, Some people like to replace that second chord of the progression, the C minor 7, with an E flat major 7. So one incarnation of this chord progression could be simply using that one shape and nothing more. You could have C major 7, third fret of the A string, move it up 3 frets, E flat major 7, then do the chromatic decline, D major 7, D flat major 7, C major 7. Very simple way to look at it, but it works. Now, just to be really thorough here, that E flat major 7 is really a C minor still, right? It's a C minor 9 without the root note. If you took a E flat major 7 and put the C in the bass, you've got the root, the flat 3, the flat 7, the 9 and the 5th. So it's giving us this kind of a chord, which again, take the root note away from this more familiar looking way of playing it, and you'll see what you're left with is an E flat major 7 chord on the top 4 strings. People like Joe Pass liked to use that trick a lot. They'd play this as a C minor voicing. The way I used to think about it, I just would think of it as being constructed off my minor third. So if I know my C minor is here, I know my flat 3 is here, and I can play the major 7 off there. As a side note, it's also a really nice way of playing over a C minor 7. You could use an E flat major 7 arpeggio. It's going to give us the sound of that C minor 9. So I guess the moral of the story so far is there are tons of options, and that's just scratching the surface, and it's kind of up to you to decide what you like the sound of best. Now for the first A section on my performance, I chose some slightly more advanced voicings for some of those chords. The C major 7, instead of playing it this way, I went for this voicing, which is a real favourite of mine. And again, it's kind of where you're thinking of a minor chord, but with the C in the bass. For me, this is something that I associate very strongly with A minor. You'll recognise that from my Misty Classy Chords video, but also from the Rebo studies. These dissonant things where you have the flat 3 and the 9 close together. But this time we're putting C in the bass. It gives us this really beautiful voicing for a C major 7. Root, 7, root again, 3. It's also good to sometimes add the 9 to that by bringing that second finger in at the 7th fret of the G string. I think we used that in the Misty Classy Chords study that I did. I can't quite remember. But two nice versions of C major chords there. And then for the C minor, I went with this, C minor 11, which is just a C minor 7 3-note voicing with the 11 on top. And then back to one of the things I showed you earlier here, the D with the C in the bass. So you're getting a really nice kind of climb there, a bit of counterpoint. Some of the notes are moving down, while other notes are moving up, and they kind of meet in the middle at that point. And then D flat over C, back to the C major. As always, you can get my very thoroughly typed out lesson materials for this stuff at the links in the description, and the materials will also include my backing tracks. I have a Patreon where for a small monthly fee you get access to all of my lesson materials, or you can buy this as a one-off purchase at the Gumroad link. Either way, thanks so much. Now if you look on a lead sheet for this, you'll likely see an A7 would be the next chord, because we want to get to D minor, and A7 would be the 5 of that D minor. So as we often see, we're just inserting the 5 of wherever we want to go to next. What I've gone with though is a C sharp diminished 7th, which you'll recognize from my diminished videos as a dominant 7th with a flattened 9 in disguise. So to me this is just A7 flat 9. You've got the 3rd, the flat 9, the 5th and the flat 7. That's very common in jazz to use a diminished in place of a dominant 7th. That leads us beautifully to the D minor. Now we're going to play a 2-5-1 back to C. So D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Now here is where you can put a bit of movement in. I think on the performance I did something like this. That's certainly one of my well-trodden paths that I like to use for a 2-5-1. D minor 7 3-note voicing, and then some of this George Van Epps or Matt Munisterry style movement, where you're thinking of a D minor triad, spread triad, and you're climbing that middle string up in semitones. So you can have a D minor walking to a G7. Neat little way to say 2-5. On this G7, you can then tritone sub the bass note to D flat. You get this D flat 7 with a flattened fifth as a kind of passing chord to take you to the C major 7, where we could just stay for 2 bars. But another very common jazz thing is to alternate between various flavors of major chord, just to create a sense of movement so things don't get too static. So C major 7 to C major 6, just 2 slightly varying shades of the same color. Then we play a 2-5-1 to E flat, F minor 7, B flat 7, E flat major 7. And again, this is where you might want to throw some stuff in. For example, that diminished trick that we spoke about earlier. F minor 7 3-note voicing, B flat 7 3-note voicing, D diminished 7. Really, that's masquerading as the B flat 7 with a flattened ninth. Leads nicely into the E flat major 7. Now we see on the horizon that another A section is coming up, and we know that that means we're going to be starting on a C major 7. So how do we get there? Well, we want to play the 5 of that, so G7. And I just went for this very simple G7 voicing here. And then we play another A section. On the original performance video here, what I did was, instead of playing these fancy things, I went more basic. I went C major 7, C minor 7. This part stayed the same. And then this time, instead of playing C sharp diminished 7 here, I went for it off the A string and then inverted it by moving it up 3 frets, or a minor third if we're being technical. Again, check out my diminished video, it really will help make sense of these things. And these again are just masquerading as a colourful version of A7, A7 flat 9. Now the next 8 bars often confuse or overwhelm people, especially at fast tempos, because there seems to be so much going on. But let's simplify this to what's really going on and remove all the extras and all the frivolities. What we're left with would be this: 1 bar of D minor 7, 1 bar of E7, 1 bar of A minor 7, 1 bar of B7, and then a typical 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 in the key of C. Just to explain a couple of things there, the D minor 7 is the 2, of course. E7 is the 5 of 6. So we're using the E7 to take us to the A minor 7. And then the B7 takes us to the E minor 7, right? Because B7 is the 5 of E minor. Here's our 3 chord. This is where we go into the typical jazz turnaround of a 3-6-2-5. Now in the key of C, if we were strictly saying diatonic, this would mean E minor 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7, C. But what's often done, and what we do here, is we turn that A minor 7 into an A dominant 7, so it becomes the 5 of the 2 chord, D minor 7, G7. So now what you're left with is parallel 2-5 movements. E minor 7, A7, that's a 2-5 in D, then D minor 7, G7, that's a 2-5 in C. And of course there's any number of voicings you can use for that stuff. Or now take it one step further and tritone sub that A7. So instead of A7, play E flat 7, then D minor 7 to G7, which we won't tritone sub, although we could have done, but we won't, then back to C. Now you've got something that looks quite different to the original 3-6-2-5 type of thing. Sounds extra jazzy, right? And it's really important that eventually you can see these clues and understand what the patterns are underneath without it having to be delivered to you on a platter, because that won't really happen in music. You'll have to sort of sniff these things coming from a distance, so to speak. When you see this, for example, rather than thinking, what the hell's that? You'll think, oh, 3-6-2-5 with a couple of subs. As always, it's just about habit. If you learn enough standards, you'll see these things repeatedly in every single standard with no exceptions, And it won't take long for you to be able to predict these movements. Now let's take that C section and double the amount of chords in the first 4 bars. This is where it can start to look confusing. So we had D minor 7 for a whole bar, and then E7 for a whole bar. So let's deal with that for a moment. We can go D minor 7, and then we can walk the bass down to a C. So you end up with a D minor 7 over C, which is still just D minor 7, right? Because that C is the flat 7. And then instead of going straight to the E7, you could go to a B minor 7 flat 5, then an E7, because of course the destination here is A minor. So you could do a minor 2-5-1 type of thing. In a minor key, the 2 would have the flattened 5th in it. And of course this chord would be the 7th chord in the harmonized C major scale, so it makes sense that it would make an appearance here. And then E7 would be the 5 of the A minor, so that would be what you'd call a minor 2-5 or 2-5-1 in A minor, however you'd like to say it. Let's take it one step further and tritone sub the 5, which all that requires is an E7, alternate the bass a tritone lower. Now you've got this really fancy chord, B flat 7, flat 5, A minor 7, and again here we can put that same kind of movement in that we did on the D minor, going from the root to the flat 7 in the bass. Now we'll go root, flat 7 of the A minor 7. And then again here, instead of going straight to B7, let's go F sharp minor 7 flat 5 to B7, because again we want to get to E minor, so this would be a minor 2-5 progression with the E minor serving as the 1 momentarily, and then we're into our turnaround. So that would sound like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. Now for the ending of this, I just couldn't resist throwing another sequence at you. I went for what we call the Ladybird turnaround. One of the prettiest turnarounds in all of jazz, named after the tune Ladybird. So this would be a C major 7, an E flat major 7, where I went for this voicing, and then an A flat major 7 and a D flat major 7, resolving back to C. Again, it's one of those sequences that when you first see it, you think, what the hell is that? Has a bit of a Giant Steps vibe about it as well, doesn't it? Now what it is, again, is 1, 6, 2, 5. 1, tritone of 6, because the 6 would be the A minor. So you think about what would be a tritone above that, E flat. 2, D minor 7, again what would be the tritone of that, A flat. Then the G7 would be the 5, what's the tritone of that, D flat. Back to the C major 7. So it's like a fully pimped out tritone subbed chord progression that started out life as a 1, 6, 2, 5. Okay, so that's the chords dealt with. You'll see in the guitar profile or in the PDFs that I've included a couple of the versions of the chord sheets. I've done my changes and then the ones that you might see in the real book or you might see other people playing, just so you've got a fully rounded view of this stuff. Now let's learn the melody. Very simple, beautiful melody that plays out of the chords themselves, as always. So we start on the root, C, and then think C major 7. Part of your arpeggio, right? Just descending from the 7 down to the 3rd, and then C minor 7 comes along, and we play this B flat note, which of course is the flat 7 of your C minor 7. And then the D7 comes along, and we play the 5th of that chord, and then the D flat comes along, and we simply descend a D flat major triad. And then C comes along, and we can just imagine moving that triad down a semitone, and playing just the 5th. So you got C major 7 to the C minor 7, D, D flat, C. Very simple but really beautiful. Now over the D minor 7 we play this, all part of a D Dorian scale, or a C major scale, starting from the D note. Then the G7 comes along, and just like we've done with the diminished chords, we bring the flat 9 in. Flat 9, sharp 9, and then the 5th of the resolving chord, C major 7. So that's kind of like this. We're getting some really colourful chords along the way. Now we move that exact phrase up a minor third, just like the chord progression did. We had the 2-5-1 in C, and then the 2-5-1 in E flat. So we're going to move this up 3 frets. So that would be all F minor 7 or F Dorian, and then B flat 7 with a flat 9, sharp 9, resolving to the 5th of your E flat major. And then we play this little passing note, which really belongs to a G7, the major third. And then we're back to the A section again. The root, the C major 7, C minor, D7, D flat major, C, just like the original A section. Now for the C section, over the D minor 7, we almost play what we played before. It's a bit of D Dorian kind of stuff. We play this. So we've got another note in there, one from outside of the key suddenly. This 9th fret of the B string. That happens to coincide with the E7. And of course that would be the major third of that chord. Then we go up to the root, and then A minor 7 comes along and we play this, implying A minor 11 to A minor 7. And then very similar to the previous phrase, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, bringing out some really important elements here, landing on the 3rd of the B7 with the root on top. So you can be thinking of a B7 there. And then we play E minor 7 to the A7. So again, notes from the chords, right? So that would be like the 11 of the E minor 7, flat 7 of the A7. And then over the D minor 7, we just hang on to this G note over the next few changes, over the G7 and onto the resolving chord as well. So this G note on the 8th fret of the B string. Beautifully complements all of those chords at the end there. Notice how when I'm playing these things and I'm trying to give you some context, I'm trying to grab some kind of underlying chord structure to provide that context, because we need harmony to really understand what we're hearing. That's something I'd recommend that you do, even if it's as simple as just grabbing root notes. For example, if I did the C section and just played root notes in the bass to provide some context and structure, we're going to hear things in a much clearer way. Check it out. It's not going to be something that you'd actually want to play much. It's going to be awkward in places, but it just kind of makes you think quickly, keeps you on your toes. And I would highly recommend getting your looper involved for this stuff. Get to the point where you can put the chord changes down in the looper flawlessly without any hiccups, and then play the melody over the top. Okay, so that's it for On Green Dolphin Street. I'm going to do much more of this sort of thing, quick standards where we can just learn the head to some of these essential old jazz tunes, as well as looking at ways to navigate through the chord changes nicely. Okay guys, so thanks for joining me for the first official entry into our must-know jazz standards series. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions at all. Please do like and subscribe and share this with another like-minded guitar playing friend of yours, and I'll see you next time for something completely different. Cheers.